MMORPGs cover every type of fictional setting, from the futuristic sci-fi world of EVE Online to the gritty fantasy of Mortal 2, and everything in between. The world of an MMORPG helps drive the adventure, holds the history, and becomes a second home for the long-term players. Some may even consider the world of an MMO one of the most important aspects. So with that said, here are 5 fictional worlds I feel would make great settings for an MMORPG. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Drive-Hayes. MMORPGs allow people to go on incredible adventures through fantastic worlds. And while every MMO may be slightly different to every other MMO, with different combat systems, different leveling up styles, or different questing systems, every single MMO relies on its world building to truly immerse the player. Now, an MMORPG world doesn't necessarily need to come from an RPG game. Warcraft started off as a real-time strategy game. Final Fantasy was a turn-based tactics game. Elder Scrolls was a first-person solo adventure. You don't need to take the gameplay of these games, just the worlds themselves, the characters, the history, the lore. Any fictional world with scope for adventure could potentially be a good base to build an MMORPG from. So remember, we're not talking about gameplay specifically here, we're talking about the fantasy world. These are 5 fantasy worlds I personally feel would make the great base for an MMORPG. Before we dive into the list, consider dropping a like on the video or subscribing to the channel for more MMO stuff. Ring the bell so you don't miss a future video. As usual, a massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. More on this at the end. For now, let's begin. Number 5. The Legacy of Kane universe. The Legacy of Kane Soul Reaver for the PlayStation 1 is one of my favourite games of all time. I actually replayed it recently for a retro review series I was doing. The series didn't do too well, but god damn do I love this game. Written by Amy Hennig, it follows the journey of Raziel, a powerful vampire lord who had the unfortunate blessing of growing wings before his master Kane. For this transgression, Kane cast Raziel down into the abyss. Countless years later, you journey as Raziel, leaving Hell and fighting your former brothers as you hunt down Kane in revenge. Soul Reaver 1 on the PlayStation 1 will be followed by Soul Reaver 2 on both the PC and the PS2, but the Legacy of Kane series isn't just Soul Reaver, with the prequel Blood Omen games seeing you playing as Kane and journeying through the land of Nosgoth, and it's the land that really stands out. Caught in a bleak war between humans and vampires, the scarred lands of Nosgoth range from the vast pillars to outdoor waterfalls, underwater cathedrals, human bastions, and vampire strongholds, with teleport gates already established, and the horrific and twisted spectral realm being a warped version of reality. There's the real potential for a brutal online adventure game here. When you play Soul Reaver, the real star of the show is the world. It is unforgettably oppressive and dripping with atmosphere. I know there was a squad-based shooter called Nosgoth, but I'm not counting that. The Soul Reaver franchise can do better, and the world lends itself to potentially being an MMO. Melee combat, abilities and spells, gliding and jumping, boss monsters, hidden dungeons and rewards for exploring, Shakespearean levels of character development and voice acting. The ingredients are there. Number 4. Warhammer 40,000. The 40k universe is so extensive that words cannot fully explain it. Warhammer 40k is more of an idea and less of a story. There are so many characters, stories, battles, events, and historical moments, both remembered and forgotten, that you could read every 40k book ever printed and still not understand everything. It really is quite expansive. What makes it perfect for an MMO is how much scope there is. Now, I know we were promised a 40k MMO many years ago and we ended up getting the disappointing Eternal Crusade. I've already made a video on that. I'm talking a more traditional MMO. We know that shooter MMOs can work. We've seen Warframe, we've seen Defiance 2050, and we know that sci-fi is popular. And with Warhammer Fantasy already having attempted the MMO, we know they are aware of the risks. You've got more than enough factions and armies, more than enough weapons, and far more than enough endless potential to design one of the grandest MMO universes to ever exist, from playing as a space marine to an orc, a Drukhari to a Tau. You've got factions and battle lines already drawn. And if you need to bring the player base together, just throw the Tyranids at everyone. Everyone hates the Tyranids, except maybe of course the Necrons. They're pretty indifferent. There you go, I've given you your first 2 story arcs. A Tyranid invasion fleet, then a Necron tomb world opens up. I mean, that's basically the Burning Crusade, then Wrath of the Lich King in space. Serious question, how have you made so many 40k games and only Space Marine and the First Dawn of War actually ended up being good? Statistically, you should have made at least 3 good games by now. Number 3, Pokemon. How this hasn't been made yet is totally beyond me. Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise in history. It's so far made $100 billion. It's made more money than Disney princesses, Harry Potter and Mario combined. The original Red and Blue games were one of the main reasons to buy a Game Boy and a link cable. Gold and Silver were the Game Boy Color's secret weapon. And now every new Nintendo console needs a Pokemon game to really drive those sales. And Pokemon Go created probably the nicest summer in the last 10 years. Remember everyone being out on their phones and catching Pokemon, chatting, just being friendly. Remember the arguments between Valor and Mystic while Instinct, the best team, just stood around being cool. Pokemon brings us together as a society, MMORPGs bring us together as gamers, and with more than enough mainline games and a plethora of spin-offs, the Pokemon world is so fleshed out already that most of your historical world building is already done. The only real question is, how would the gameplay work? Would you play as a Pokemon trainer and control your Pokemon in battle? Would it be turn-based or action combat? Would you play as a Pokemon? There's lots of questions, and they can all be worked out in game design. I'm not saying I know exactly how the game would work, I'm saying the world of Pokemon is ripe for an MMORPG. I've always said you need franchise recognition in order to launch an MMO in a world already flooded with MMOs, and you can't get more recognition than Pokemon. Number 2, The Witcher. Monsters hunt people, witches hunt monsters. It's a very simple concept. The fantasy world of writer Andrzej Sapkowski is the base for one of the best video games of all time, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The expansion packs, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, are better than some entire games, and the Netflix series took everyone's favourite muscled super nerd Henry Cavill and gave us the best dark fantasy since Game of Thrones Season 1 to 5. The fictional world of The Witcher is similar to medieval Europe, except it has a few more manticores and drowners, meaning it's not going to be too much of a culture shock if it did become an MMO. Fantasy worlds are kind of our thing. And with various Witcher schools focusing on various fighting styles, a massive assortment of factions already established, castles, cities, towns, swamps, bogs, legends, myths, and monsters, the world of The Witcher is a fantasy fan's dream. Imagine training with your school, adventuring into the world, joining forces against larger monsters, hunting down beasts and taking grisly trophies, upgrading your equipment, your swords and your spells. Remember, I'm just talking about taking the world and using the world as a setting for an MMO, not necessarily taking the gameplay. But in The Witcher's case, yeah, sure, take the gameplay too. Let me and my friends journey deep into a manticore lair. Let us lay a trap for an angry giant. Let us question how our horses collectively all got onto the roof. And number 1, The Legend of Zelda. I firmly believe, with the right team, The Legend of Zelda could give us one of the best online experiences ever because of its absolutely incredible world. Think about it. You've got an expansive world with loads of different biomes, from the Kokiri Forest to the Goron Mountain, the Zora's Domain or the Gerudo Desert. You've got a massive amount of dungeons to draw from. Almost every mainline Zelda game has at least 6 dungeons in it, so you can recreate a few or take inspiration from them and make something entirely new. The world has been seen through various timelines, various ages and various seasons. You've got items from swords and shields to boots and tops. You've got movement enhancing items like the Rock's Feather or the Chain Shot, the rod that makes blocks, the spade, the boomerang, the ring system from Oracle of Ages and Seasons. There is a wealth of Zelda lore to draw upon here. I'm not saying make everyone Link or the Hero of Time, quite the opposite. Have players be another Kokiri or a Goron or a Zora. Have them explore the land of Hyrule. Have them level up various stats, fighting, blocking, climbing, your picking up chickens skill. Then have people team up to explore dungeons and hunt down treasure. Basically, make Breath of the Wild online. Make Genshin Impact without the gacha system and reskinned as a Zelda game. You've got so many enemies, so many stories, so many iconic locations to draw upon. It is a recognizable franchise and it could be so much fun if done right. So, 5 fictional worlds I feel are fleshed out enough or have the potential to be solid settings for MMORPGs. The Legacy of Kane, Warhammer 40k, Pokemon, The Witcher, and The Legend of Zelda. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or if you have any suggestions for fictional worlds, and if we get enough suggestions, I'll look at making another list. Another massive thank you to the Patreon supporters and Twitch subs for keeping the channel alive. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and our Discord. And as always, have a great day.